You're listening to Crime Wine, the daily podcast that pairs perfectly with silence and suspense. My husband had remained close to his childhood friend, let's call him John, well into adulthood. They've been inseparable since elementary school. When I met John, I thought he was kind, docile, and incredibly wholesome, the kind of guy who could get along with anyone. Dependable, trustworthy, genuinely good. In a world where real friendships are rare, we felt lucky. John was like family. We were all nerds at heart, bonding over retro games, tech, and home-built computers. He'd often swing by, help us troubleshoot our setups, and swap little coding tricks with my husband. But something about him always puzzled me. John was single, always had been. Not once had we heard of a girlfriend, a date, nothing. As the years passed, it became a quiet curiosity between my husband and me. We wondered, was he gay? Afraid to come out because of his conservative family? We never asked. It wasn't our business. Then, John moved, 3 hours away, into a house owned by his sister, who wasn't ready to retire yet. At first we assumed it was a step toward independence, but that wasn't the case, and soon after the move, he vanished. No calls, no visits, no online activity. My husband missed him deeply. I did too. So I decided to reach out and reignite the connection. When he picked up the phone, it was like no time had passed, at least for him. We made plans to visit. His new neighborhood was oddly remote, tucked away from everything. The house looked unkempt, cluttered, more like a bunker than a home. He had declined a promotion at work, said he didn't want the added hours. His room looked like a teenager's den, messy, wires everywhere, computer parts scattered across the floor. He mentioned his sister still visited every other weekend, and he resented the intrusion on his privacy. Something felt off. At dinner, I finally asked why he'd gone silent. He brushed it off, claimed he'd been busy with the move, said he'd never intended to lose touch. He was polite, but there was a coldness behind the words. They felt rehearsed, scripted. When we asked if he was seeing anyone, he replied that finances were tight and it wasn't the right time. Reasonable answers, too reasonable, and yet my instincts screamed otherwise. He wasn't the same. We drove home unsettled. Still, we hoped the reconnection would stick. It didn't. Time passed. John faded again. But on social media I noticed something strange. Though mostly inactive, he would occasionally like and comment on posts from Nickelodeon. Innocent enough, maybe, but the tone of his comments was peculiar. They read like a teenager's, excited about episodes, eagerly anticipating the next one. It felt out of place for a man pushing 40. I didn't mention it. Maybe I should have. Years later I made another effort. He was now back in his childhood home, caring for his sick mother. When I called to meet up, he was evasive, said he wasn't settled yet, but he had his old room, his old house. What was there to settle? He asked to postpone the visit. And then, one day, my husband called me downstairs, pale as a ghost. I rolled my eyes. He could be dramatic sometimes. But when I saw his face, I rushed. He pointed at the TV, a courtroom, shackles, orange jumpsuit, and then, John. I froze. It was him. His full name, clear as day. The news anchor's voice cut like glass. John had been arrested in connection with one of the largest child trafficking rings ever dismantled. A years-long investigation. CSAM found through a dark web sting operation. My breath caught in my throat. We couldn't look away. Police had raided both his mother's and sister's homes. Hundreds of files on his devices. A confirmed DNA match. He was facing over 30 years. He'd be an old man by the time he ever saw daylight again, if he ever did. We were in shock. His sister scrubbed all traces of him, removed his name from her home, deleted him from social media. It was clear his family believed the evidence. They disowned him. We did the same. We deleted his contact, erased every trace from our lives. We didn't reach out to his family. We never visited him. But the question still lingered. The betrayal broke my husband. He became guarded, suspicious of everyone. How could he not be? How do you trust again after realizing the person who sat in your living room, who played board games with you, who shared your jokes and life stories, was a monster? John was never who we thought he was. He wore a mask so perfect, so ordinary, that we never saw what lay beneath. But now we know, and will never forget. My granddaddy was a Texas Ranger during the Great Depression, a time when the lines between survival and sin blurred for too many. He died when I was young, so most of his stories came through my father. But this one always stuck. It wasn't just a tale of justice, it was a glimpse into something far darker. Back then, Cochran County had turned into the bank robbery capital of West Texas. Small towns like Morton, Whiteface, and Bledsoe were hit so often, the locals stopped locking their vaults. They just left them open to save the hinges. Some criminals tried running west into New Mexico. The feds were waiting, but others simply vanished. No trace, no car, no cash trail. One case involved a robber who panicked and shot a clerk in cold blood. Tips came flooding in, but one stood out. A man swore he saw the getaway car parked outside a place called the Yellow Rose Motel, so Granddaddy drove out there. The owners were a kindly old couple, said business had dried up since '29. No records, no questions. Pay 50 cents, pick a room, check out whenever. They let the Rangers search the place top to bottom. Nothing suspicious, nothing found. Just two friendly faces and a worn-out roadside inn. But weeks later, another tip came, same motel. A witness saw a man carrying a bag identical to one stolen in a liquor store hit. Again, Granddaddy visited. Again, the couple smiled and shrugged. No memory, no guest list, no help. A third robbery, a third visit, this time a lie. The old man admitted speaking to the suspect but pretended not to remember who he was. Granddaddy showed a photo. The man faltered. Said he hadn't looked long enough to know. But my grandfather saw it in his eyes. He was lying. They didn't arrest him, not yet. They needed more. My grandfather's partner believed they had the scam figured out. The motel wasn't just shelter, it was a service. Criminals paid thousands to disappear, and the couple got a cut. The Rangers just had to prove it. Then came the break. A jailed bandit, bitter about being left behind, spilled everything. His partner had taken the cash and vanished, straight to the Yellow Rose. Said the couple helped fugitives disappear in exchange for money. My granddaddy's partner nearly jumped out of his boots. "I knew it!" he yelled. Still, no one knew how they made them vanish. That secret kept the cuffs off. So they came up with a plan. They sent in a young ranger undercover, someone the couple had never met. He played the part of a desperate criminal on the run. And it worked. The couple promised him safe passage to Mexico for a few $100, no questions asked. They staged it all. A fake news bulletin, a screeching car, a man with a duffel full of fake cash. From a water tower half a mile away, my granddaddy and his partner watched through binoculars as the old man helped the undercover ranger hide his car and let him out of sight. Then, silence. They didn't wait any longer. The Rangers came in heavy. Sheriffs, federal agents, no search warrant, no knocking, just boots through doors. The motel was torn apart, but nothing. Until the dogs started barking behind the garage. They circled a rusted-out truck, noses low to the ground. Underneath it was a rug covered in dust and gravel. When they peeled it back, they found a heavy iron hatch set into the earth. They pried it open. What they found underneath wasn't just a bunker. It was a tomb. There was a blood drain, a hose, a workbench, jars of chemicals. But the horror wasn't just in the killing, it was in the care. The old couple had preserved the bodies, varnished them, combed their hair, dressed them in suits, then posed them in a furnished room around a poker table, as if they were just passing time on a long, quiet night. Books, records, a radio, even a clock ticking. 7 men sat there, silent, still, perfectly preserved. The old couple claimed they weren't sadistic, claimed they killed only fugitives. said they never would have harmed the ranger if they'd known, but he revealed himself too late. The old man hit him with a hammer. By the time they opened that hatch, the blood had already been drained from his body. They said they couldn't bury the bodies. Too risky. So they created this, a place where bad men stayed forever, a mock saloon, a shrine, a lie dressed up as mercy. They found 4 more bodies than the rangers were even looking for, men with bounties, men with secrets, all vanished into the yellow rose. There was no trial. The old man died of a heart attack in his cell. The woman passed in her sleep the night before her arraignment. Cancer, they said. My granddaddy never forgave himself for sending his partner in first, said it should have been him. That guilt followed him to the grave, and it's followed our family ever since. You know what still chills me? They never saw themselves as killers. They believed they were doing good. Between 1997 and 2008, I worked as an emergency roadside assistant. That's just a fancy name for a repairman and tow truck driver in the Southwest United States. Before that, I was a mechanic at a dealership. The only difference was that, with the roadside assistance company, my service area was much larger. Most of the cases I handled were routine, ordinary, forgettable. But there were a few I'll never forget. The first incident took place in the late 1990s. It was early in the day, and I had just finished another call. I was driving on a remote section of highway when I saw a car parked on the shoulder, hood up, hazard lights flashing. Behind the wheel was a young woman, dressed in short shorts and a bikini top. She gave off a kind of Daisy Duke vibe. I pulled over, ready to help. She told me the car had just died. I suggested maybe it had overheated, but when I asked more questions, it became clear she knew nothing about it. "Oh, it's my daddy's," she said. Something about her tone, her fake ignorance, didn't sit right with me. Still, I carried on. I asked her to try starting the car. She refused, said I should do it instead. As I reached for the driver's side door handle, something caught my eye. A flannel blanket was spread across the rear floorboards, and beneath it the soles of 2 tennis shoes stuck out. My gut told me everything was wrong. I faked an excuse about needing a scan tool, jogged back to my truck, and drove off. In my mirror, I saw her throw her hands up in frustration. And then, a heavy-set man stepped out of the back seat, holding what looked like a crowbar. I called dispatch immediately. They promised to notify the highway patrol, but I never found out what came of it. That experience made me much more cautious, especially at night. The second story happened years later, in 2008. It was late summer, close to midnight, and still unbearably hot. I was almost off my shift when I came around a curve and saw an SUV stopped in the middle of the road. The driver's door was wide open. A man in a dark suit was pacing behind it. When I approached, I realized he was drunk. He claimed he'd hit a dog or something. That wasn't unusual out there. I'd handled plenty of deer-related accidents. I told him to sit while I checked. At the front of the SUV, I saw blood on the grille, but no trail leading away. That was strange, so I crouched down to look underneath, and there she was. The distorted, bloody face of a young woman staring back at me. I stumbled back, nearly shouting. I had to take a moment to collect myself before looking again. The second time was no easier. The girl had been struck and dragged. A horrifying sight I'll never forget. I told the driver it was a coyote, just to keep him in place. Then I called the police. As I sat in my truck, waiting, I watched him, drunk, oblivious, and my disgust grew with every passing second. That poor girl was probably just a hitchhiker, walking alone in the dark, and this man had run her down like she was nothing. The police arrived within 15 minutes. I showed them the body. He was arrested on the spot. After giving my statement and hauling the SUV to impound, I went home. But sleep never came easy again. The image of her face wouldn't leave me. My wife could see how much I was suffering. She made me promise to quit, and I did. I went back to mechanic work, and I've never looked back. Until now. This is the last time I'll ever talk about it. Some things are best left in the past. I shouldn't have to tell anyone how stressful the last 2 or 3 years have been. So many people lost homes, businesses, loved ones, through no fault of their own. At first, I thought I'd escape that fate, but the universe had other plans. Because of an old car and a drunk driver, I lost the most important person in my life. We married late. He was hesitant, afraid of ending up like his friends with bitter divorces. I'd been married once before, and I was ready to start a family. Still, I put no pressure on him. Eventually, he proposed, and we were happy. We tried for years to have kids. Even put off buying a new car just to afford fertility treatments. But life had other plans. Fast forward to summer 2021. The world was finally opening back up. We went out to our favorite restaurant. Dinner was amazing, like old times. For a moment, everything felt perfect. Until the drive home. My 20-year-old VW Golf sputtered, jerked, then died on the shoulder. Alan called AAA. We waited. 10 minutes later, a highway patrolman pulled up to check on us. I watched Alan step out, chatting with him. When everything went sideways. A car slammed into the patrol vehicle. I saw it hurl straight toward us. The officer tried to push Alan out of the way, but it was too late. Booth's men were killed instantly. I woke up seconds later. Smoke, twisted metal, and silence. My car had been shoved 20 yards down the shoulder. I climbed out, bruised but alive, and then I saw them. Alan, the officer, gone. And then I heard shouting. The driver of the car stumbled out, blood pouring from his head. The stench of alcohol hit me. He was drunk. I lost it. I attacked him right there on the highway, until bystanders pulled me away. I collapsed. I cried like I've never cried before. The funeral was a blur. The grief counseling after, slow, painful, but it saved me. It's true what they say. Time heals. But what they don't tell you is that healing leaves scars. And those scars, I see. I was 18, fresh into college, and living out of state for the first time. My first semester had just ended and it was May. I was heading home for my brother's wedding. The drive was smooth, traffic steady, the sun high in the sky. Somewhere along I-40 in Tennessee, I checked my mirror. That's when I noticed him. A truck lingered in the lane beside me, headlights locked in my passenger mirror. Even in broad daylight, the driver kept flashing his lights. At first I thought he wanted me to move over, but when I changed lanes, he stayed right behind me. Close, uncomfortably close, refusing to let any cars slip between us. He honked, waved, a knot tightened in my stomach. I wanted to believe he was trying to help, that maybe something was wrong with my car. A week earlier, I'd patched a hole in my tire. What if it had given out? The thought consumed me. Nervous, I planned to pull off at the next exit. There it was, a gas station. I turned in. My relief vanished as the truck followed, pulling into the lot and parking just yards away. My heart pounded. I jumped out, did a quick inspection. Tires fine, nothing wrong. He climbed down from his truck. My pulse spiked. I grabbed the gas nozzle, phone in hand. One already dialed, just one tap away from calling for help. He approached. I stayed between my open driver's door and the hose, forcing a barrier. He stopped a few feet away, looked me over and said, "Weren't you a purty thing?" Every muscle in me tensed. I was 18, barely 125 pounds. No match if he tried anything. I muttered a thank you, trying to mask my panic. He offered to pay for my gas. I refused. My gut screamed not to accept, not to give him any reason to expect something in return. Then came the questions. Where was I from? Where was I headed? What college did I attend? My instincts blared. Lie. Lie about everything. So I did. Nothing I told him was the truth. The pump clicked. Only $12 worth. That was my escape. I forced a quick goodbye, slid into my seat, slammed the door and drove off. Eyes locked on the mirror, waiting, dreading, half expecting to see that truck looming behind me again. But he didn't follow. He stayed in the lot, fading into the distance as I sped back toward the interstate. To this day, I don't know what he wanted. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was something much worse. What I do know is that I never reported him, and I regret that. Ever since, I've never looked at truck drivers the same way again. The night train from Brighton to Ashford cut through the storm like a silent predator. Rain hammered the windows, blurring the world outside, while inside the carriage, the fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, throwing brief pools of stark white over rows of empty seats. Shadows shifted unnaturally, not because of ghosts, but because someone was moving deliberately in the darkness, calculating, watching. Ethan Harper sat in a corner seat, a leather briefcase at his feet, laptop open but ignored. He had carried intelligence before, but never like this. Inside the briefcase were documents that could topple governments, proof of double agents, covert operations gone wrong, and secrets certain organizations had killed to protect. He wasn't just a courier tonight, he was a target. The train shuddered over a stretch of rail, and Ethan's instincts screamed danger. He wasn't alone. The click of polished shoes against metal echoed faintly behind him. Someone had followed him onto the train. Someone trained, deliberate, silent until now. Lightning illuminated the far end of the carriage, and for a fleeting moment, Ethan saw the outline of a figure hunched against the wall. Then darkness reclaimed the space. He had seconds, maybe less, to plan his next move. The storm outside was the perfect cover. No one would notice a confrontation here. The train's hum masked subtle movements, the hiss of brakes concealing the soft scrape of someone trailing him. Ethan's hand rested on his briefcase. Every secret inside was more dangerous than any weapon he had carried. Losing it was not an option. A note slid across the aisle, almost casually, yet deliberately placed. Ethan retrieved it, heart racing. Typed in clean, impersonal font were the words, "Do not attempt to hide. You're already being watched." No signature, no origin, just a threat and a promise. He moved toward the middle of the train, eyes scanning every shadow. In the third compartment, a laptop blinked on, streaming multiple camera feeds, footage from hidden cameras inside the train. Ethan realized the horrifying truth. This wasn't random. Every move he had made, every route he had taken, had been anticipated. Someone knew exactly where he would be, right down to the seat he'd choose and the storm he'd encounter. Outside, a black van mirrored the train's route along the narrow service road. Through the rain-smeared windows of the laptop feed, a man in tactical gear monitored him. Every step Ethan took, every glance, every pause, it was all visible to him. This was no ordinary tale. This was professional, precise, deadly. The train jolted violently. Something had been placed on the tracks, deliberately. A device, perhaps, or a sabotage meant to stop him. Ethan ducked instinctively, heart hammering, but he couldn't risk panic. He had to think. Every second counted. He found a hatch beneath the floor, emergency access to the train's control mechanisms. Crawling inside, he worked quickly, drawing on knowledge he hadn't used in years. The mechanical operations of freight and passenger trains, the sensors, the emergency braking systems. Sparks flew from wires he touched. The train groaned under the strain, and Ethan realized the window to survive was narrowing. Above him, footsteps approached, measured, controlled. The operative aboard the train was closing in. Ethan paused only to glance at the monitors again. One feed showed a map of the surrounding rail lines, marked with the positions of multiple vehicles, tailing, anticipating, intercepting. The operation had layers, contingencies, and no room for error. A jolt, another flash of lightning, and the operative was suddenly visible in the corridor, a tall man, tactical gear black against the flickering lights, calm, professional. Ethan tightened his grip on a hidden sidearm in his jacket. It wasn't a bluff. If the briefcase was compromised, the consequences would be catastrophic. Nations could fall over the intelligence it contained. Ethan's mind raced. He executed a risky maneuver, using the hatch to access the undercarriage, rerouting emergency brakes to slow the train gradually. Sparks flew, metal groaned, the storm outside raging, but the plan worked. The train slowed just enough to reduce the immediate threat. The operative, expecting a straightforward interception, faltered, his timing thrown off. Moments later, the train screeched into Ashford Station. Ethan slipped into the shadows as the operative chased the train's interior, but the outside had changed. Mist hung low over the platform, and no backup units were visible. Ethan vanished into the mist, briefcase still secure, adrenaline fueling every step. From a distance, the van remained. Its lights were off, engines silent. But etched on the platform, barely visible under the rain, were the words scrawled in industrial spray. "You cannot hide. We are everywhere." Ethan knew this was only the beginning. Whoever orchestrated this operation was patient, professional, and ruthless. Every step he took now would be under scrutiny. Every contact he had could be compromised. But one truth was clear. The intelligence he carried could not fall into their hands. Failure was not an option. Not tonight, not ever. And as the mist swallowed him, Ethan Harper understood something else. The game had changed. The storm, the train, the operative. It was no longer just a delivery. It was an initiation into a world of shadows where survival required cunning, speed, and absolute certainty that your enemies were always watching. He was alone but hunted, and in the world of espionage, that was never safe. The afternoon at Madison Station was unusually crowded. It wasn't just the ordinary bustle of commuters. Today, a government recruitment exam in the nearby town of Lonesville had drawn a sea of young faces. On the wooden benches, in the waiting area, and around the electronic display boards, anxious candidates fidgeted, checking train schedules, whispering to one another. At the announcement, people poured onto the tracks, scrambling up to the train waiting at platform 3. Most passengers already had tickets, but the congestion caused by the exam crowd meant that some with reservations struggled to get aboard. At the entrance to the sleeper car, 5 passengers were stuck, trying to squeeze in. Meanwhile, the air-conditioned first-class compartment held an entirely different atmosphere. Quiet, calm. Patrons were seated comfortably on the wide, cushioned benches, waiting for the train to pull out. In compartment 13, one such passenger sat facing the window. Amresh Ashford, in his mid-50s, was a retired colonel, now a criminal psychologist and university professor. His face was broad, framed by a thick, meticulously groomed mustache curling above his lips. A small belly protruded under his crisp white shirt, and an old scar ran along his wrist, a remnant of some long-forgotten adventure. He had authored books, yet today he merely observed the crowd below with quiet disdain. From the corner of his eye, he noted the sea of faces on the platform, young, eager, tense, all caught up in the rush of life. Flipping through the pages of his English newspaper, he barely registered the passing minutes. A half-empty bottle of water sat beside him. He took 2 slow sips, then leaned out of the window, scanning the sprawling station, the old railway cars, the boundary walls of the nearby employee colony, and the occasional motorcycle parked lazily by the tracks. Suddenly the compartment door slid open. "Hello," said a man, appearing to be in his mid-40s. Amresh looked up, slightly startled, and offered a courteous smile. The man was dressed casually, a striped collared t-shirt and blue jeans, dragging behind him a trolley bag. He settled across from Amresh, exhaling deeply as he lowered himself into the seat. For a few moments he adjusted his bag, pulled out some papers, and began scribbling in shorthand with a pen that seemed to falter in his hand. Amresh's keen eyes studied him carefully. Something about the man demanded attention, not just the movement of the pen, but the nervous way he handled the papers, flipping them over and over, as if hiding some secret. Finally the man paused, smiled, and muttered under his breath, "Let's get this done." "Your pen seems to be struggling," Amresh said quietly. The man glanced up, nodded, and handed over both pen and paper. Amresh adjusted them carefully, then returned them to the man with a faint smile. "I see you've got talent," Amresh remarked, almost to himself, watching the man begin again. The train jerked forward, leaving the city behind, giving way to endless stretches of green fields, winding paths, and a sky that seemed to go on forever. The man, noticing Amresh's attention, leaned slightly forward, curiosity twinkling in his eyes. "You seem to recognize me," he said slyly, placing his papers aside. Amresh's response was calm, deliberate. "Your time at the airport, the pattern of your movements, it all gives you away." The man smiled knowingly, lowering his trolley bag to the floor. "You've got sharp eyes, Mr. Ashford," he said. "I'm Victor Yates. I run a business in New Orleans. Just got back from a flight from Lonesville." Amresh nodded, acknowledging the introduction. Victor extended his hand, which Amresh shook firmly. Victor's eyes gleamed with a mischievous intelligence. He was about to tell a story, one that would blur the lines between truth and fiction, between morality and calculation. From his bag, he pulled out a black-covered book, its spine stained with what looked like red ink, and handed it across. "This," Victor said, "is a tale of precision. A perfect plan. A perfect execution." Amresh opened the book, noting the title embossed in gold, "The Perfect Mind." The pages seemed heavy with suspense, with the promise of secrets that few would dare uncover. Victor leaned back, crossing one leg over the other, and began. "In a world of 7 billion, the greatest truth is this: nothing is free. Every bite of bread, every soft bed, every smile has its cost. Often, the path is twisted. Deceit, betrayal, lies become necessities. I was never born to blend in with the anonymous crowd. I acted with my mind, not my heart. That is why, in business and in life, I always stayed ahead." As Victor spoke, the story unfolded with cinematic intensity. A husband discovering his wife's affair, a carefully laid plan to confront the interloper, a chilling execution that would leave no trace, no evidence, no chance of discovery. Amresh's eyes followed every word, every gesture, as the train cut through the scenic American heartland. Rolling hills, distant mountains and fields, washed in rain, streaked past the window, a perfect backdrop for the story's tension. Victor's voice lowered, conspiratorial. The night was carefully chosen, the setting perfect. A private party on a riverboat. Music, lights, celebration. But beneath the laughter, a storm brewed. I knew every move, every glance, every plan of the man who had dared cross the line. Amresh listened intently as the narrative grew darker, the suspense building with each revelation. He could feel the meticulous planning, the thrill of control, the cold, calculated precision of a mind capable of perfect murder. Victor continued, painting the scene in vivid strokes. The party, the unsuspecting guests, the DJ who would unknowingly play a role in a deadly plot, and the subtle manipulations that would turn fate toward a shocking conclusion. Every detail was exact, every character's motivation crystal clear. And yet, through it all, there was a human element, a tangle of desire, jealousy, vengeance, and fear that made the story pulse with life. The train rumbled on, the rhythmic clatter of the wheels against the rails echoing the tension in the compartment. Amresh's gaze occasionally flicked to Victor, noting the glimmer of satisfaction, the careful control of every word, every pause. By the time the train approached Lonesville, the story had reached a fever pitch. Victor's narrative, blending real-life experience with a masterful thriller, left no room for doubt. This was a mind operating at the edge of obsession, capable of calculating every outcome with chilling precision. And yet, beneath the meticulous plotting, there was an unspoken question. Could the lines between fiction and reality remain so clearly defined? Or had Victor already blurred them beyond recognition? Amresh turned the page, his mind racing. Outside, the fields and distant cityscape blurred by, but inside compartment 13, the tension was palpable, the suspense nearly tangible. Victor leaned back, finishing his tale with a calm, almost casual remark. And that, Mr. Ashford, is how the perfect plan comes to fruition. Precision, patience, control. No evidence, no suspicion, nothing left behind but the inevitability of the outcome. Amresh closed the book slowly, letting the weight of the narrative settle. He looked at Victor, a mixture of admiration and unease in his eyes. The Chicago Express continued to cut through the landscape, and for a moment, the world seemed suspended between the rhythm of the rails and the pulse of a story that was far more than just fiction. When my buddy Craig and I were younger, we did a terrible thing. Names are changed here to protect the not-so-innocent. I want to start by saying this straight. You have every right to hate me. The guilt I feel is immense, and I can't even turn myself in now, because we were already punished at the time, or at least that's what everyone said. Maybe it's true. Maybe we were just kids. But I can't accept it. We ruined a guy's life, possibly forever, and we did it by exploiting his absolute worst fear. At the time, I didn't even know it was his fear. How could I? Who actually has a deathly fear of mummies? It all started at our local museum. They had a rare Egyptian exhibit, and Mr. Barker, our English teacher, not our history teacher, volunteered to take a small group from our grade. Maybe he was just interested in Egypt. Who knows? But at the time, Craig and I didn't think much of it. As we walked through the exhibit, Mr. Barker alternated between being enthusiastic and oddly jumpy. We didn't connect the dots. We didn't realize he was getting uneasy around the two mummies on display. Soon, boredom got the better of us. Craig and I wandered off to the back of the group. We first teased each other about a vase supposedly containing the organs of a vizier. Then we found a fake crocodile. Even it had a disclaimer tucked in the back, but by then we were hooked on mischief. Finally, we stumbled across a grey locked door labelled "Staff Only." Being the idiots we were, I stole the sign and hid it in my bag. Inside, we discovered a restoration room, tools, random exhibits, and, at the far end, an open sarcophagus.
and in it, a real mummy. Not behind glass, not partially displayed, just there. Part of the body was exposed, its bandages peeled away. Craig and I were awestruck. Naturally, we wanted to show Mr. Barker. We thought he'd get a kick out of it. We led him to the room, but as he went inside, curiosity, or maybe something else, made us hesitate. Then we did it. We shut the door behind him and latched it. At first, he didn't notice, but then the reaction hit. 1 second, he's examining the mummy. The next, he's hammering on the door, screaming. Craig and I ran, hiding at a safe distance. We were terrified. We had no idea about his phobia. How could we? Through the small window, we watched him. And then, the mummy itself seemed to fly toward the door. We heard him yell. It was like he was using the mummy to break free. My stomach dropped. We thought we'd driven our teacher insane and destroyed a priceless artifact. After what felt like 10 minutes, museum staff arrived. The door was unlatched. Mr. Barker emerged, trembling, and then he vomited. Black liquid. In that moment, I wasn't thinking rationally. I believed in curses. I thought we'd unleashed something terrible. Turns out, the priceless mummy wasn't priceless at all. The exhibit was largely replicas, with a few disclaimers. The corpse inside had been legally acquired decades earlier, meant for restoration practice. Still, we trapped him in a room with a dead body, and he'd manhandled it, inhaling the dust. In the aftermath, everyone dismissed it as a harmless schoolboy prank. Mr. Barker took an extended leave. Our parents were soft on us, and Craig and I never told another soul. But I've carried the guilt ever since. Even today, I wonder how Mr. Barker is, if he's truly okay, and if he ever held any resentment. Craig and I stay in touch, and we both agree we'll never forgive ourselves for triggering his phobia, no matter how safe the situation actually was. In 1958, a quiet college student from Kansas shocked the nation with a crime so calculated it defied belief. This is the story of a boy no one truly knew. But today, we're heading somewhere a little different. I hail from the north of England, and this story takes place in Yorkshire at a place called House Gorge. House Gorge is a limestone valley, a tourist attraction, and home to the Tom Taylor Cave. It's named after highwaymen, and if you ever visit, you'll see Narnia-themed displays, a statue of Ashlyn the lion, and a small activity centre and cafe. Back in 2012, I went there on a school trip with my Year 7 class. Our geography teacher, Mr. Fisher, led the trip, accompanied by Mrs. Jones, our PE teacher. Fisher was usually a no-nonsense big man with a booming voice and a bushy beard, but that day, he was acting strange. He flinched at every sound, jumped at every passerby, and kept warning us to stay away from other visitors. At first, we thought he was joking. My friends and I even appointed ourselves as his guardians, patrolling around him, play-acting like protectors. Fisher thanked us, which made us feel smug. Until he mentioned a boy on the trip. Let's call him Jason. He whispered to us that Jason had been sent on this trip for unknown reasons, that he was up to something, and revealed that he was a victim of gang stalking, a term none of us had ever heard. Fisher said that we were now his trusted lieutenants, and that we might need to respond with reasonable violence if necessary. We laughed it off, until we realized he was serious. We were following him through Tom Taylor Cave. He ignored teaching altogether, pulling us aside whenever a visitor passed, pointing out suspects. Then he spotted a woman wearing dark glasses indoors. He told us to crowd into a small alcove. "She's one of them," he said. In his mind, she was part of the gang stalking him, reporting our every move. Then, a man intervened, trying to guide Fisher away, but Fisher's mind had already labeled him a threat. He grabbed the man, slammed him against a railing, and began stomping. It was terrifying. Girls screamed, Boys froze. We were trapped underground with a teacher we were supposed to trust, witnessing violence unfold. Thankfully, other visitors intervened, pulling Fisher away, and volunteers shepherded us to safety. Jason even helped locate Mrs. Jones's group, who were out canoeing at the time. Fisher never returned to school. Rumor has it he developed severe mental illness, perhaps early-onset Alzheimer's, fixating on gang-stalking delusions that dominated his life. Looking back, what terrifies me isn't the violent outburst itself. It's how the brain can turn on you, how someone you trust can become trapped in patterns of paranoia, believing in a world that doesn't exist, seeing threats everywhere. That day, Fisher's mind became a labyrinth of fear, and none of us will ever forget it.